I'm just gonna put this on. So uh, keep going, keep going. Um, just for Anthony, and we got a couple other guys here. We got a bunch of guys who are like all over the world, so we'll see how many guys show up. But everyone will watch this eventually. But just for Anthony's benefit. So what was just explain the bet?
Here's the thing. You know, Tom and I, who were roommates in housemates in college, have known each other for years, but have a deep mutual contempt for each other's teams. I grew up a Lakers fan and made the very difficult transition to Clippers fan. And Tom has always, of course, been a Celtics fan. So the bet this year was the loser has to fly to the other one's city and take him out to a restaurant of his choice. And it was whoever went farther, the Celtics or the Clippers.
I gave you both the Clippers and the Lakers, by the way.
I didn't want the Lakers.
Oh, I'm just
Uh,
saying, I did.
I don't remember that, but I'm going to go back
It
over the
doesn't
record.
matter. You guys both lost in the first round, so like it doesn't even matter.
Well, at any rate, and then Tom, in a
So
like
I
a
won the first
rare,
bet. I did be clear, I won the first bet.
you did win the first bet, and then in a strange act of mercy, you said, "How about we go double or nothing on?" Because I was saying the East is like a joke compared to the Western Conference. Even though West didn't quite live up to their billing this year, it's still, and now everybody's in the West is significant, is even better is going to be even better this coming season. So I said, well, the West is the superior conference. They're going to win the thing. And Tom picked up the gauntlet because he's a competitive goofball. And said, well, let's make it double or nothing. And he's like, are you sure you want
West
to do that?
versus East, whoever wins the championship.
Yeah.
So it took game seven, took Halliburton going out on the stretcher, but you guys did win. So like
Unbelievable. What a
I still
series.
have dinner with you in LA or in Boston at your choice. So all right, let's
Blessings
get
be upon
serious, somewhat serious here. All right, so why did you not become a McKinsey consultant when you graduated Wesleyan?
I mean, well, let me just say, first of all, I don't know if they would have me. But second of all, when I graduated, and there was no way that I was going to do that. My conception of myself and what I was and who I thought I was in the world had absolutely nothing to do with McKinsey at all. In fact, it was antithetical to that. Um, at that time, I was like, I was half sports person, but I was really um half arty person. Like I was into theater and I was into writing and I was into film and I thought and to me the most important thing was not how much did you make, but do you have anything to say? Okay, that to me was the priority. And my attitude at the time, I mean, I'm just being totally frank here, right? My attitude at the time was people who are interested exclusively in making money have nothing to say. That was my thinking. That's the way I thought as a 21-year-old person, right? And in a way, there's a pretentiousness to that. And a pretentiousness in that I was kind of pretending to be something. I was born in an affluent area. Everything was relatively easy. So the persona I had adopted was someone who was kind of sort of opposed to the idea of making money for money's sake. I mean, that was my thinking as a 21-year-old.
So what was your first job after Wesleyan?
So what I used to do is every summer, in the trade papers for the entertainment industry, Variety and the Hollywood Reporter, they would have a list of all the films that were going to be in production that summer. And I would write letters to every producer that was going to have a film in production to find out if they needed production assistance. Someone just to like grab coffee, do that kind of a thing. And I would always end up getting one or two responses, and I feel big and I have the Wesleyan writing program to thank for all of that. And so I would take these jobs as like production assistant or producer's assistant or just assistant, writ large. And that's what I thought I was going to do, something in production or it was a vague notion that I was going to be in the entertainment industry somehow. I wasn't focused. I didn't necessarily know specifically where I was going with that. But those were my jobs. My first job was as I was a production assistant on a movie called Brewster's Millions with Richard Pryor and John Candy. It was actually it was part of it was a sports movie. He was a washed up minor league pitcher, Richard Pryor, who was given this premise would so not fly. You couldn't do it today. It was basically you're given $30 million, and the premise is he has to spend it all in like a month in order to in order to get the thing that he wanted. It's like,
That was the movie.
you could you imagine and it was a remake. It was a remake of a movie with a very similar theme.
So how did you go from that to Will and Grace?
I had those kinds of jobs, and then in the late 80s and early 90s, I got a job that really positioned me to be, to do the thing I thought maybe I wanted to do. I became the assistant to a movie director named Sidney Pollack. Sidney Pollack directed um, Tootsie and The Firm and Out of Africa. These were huge movies in their day, and I had enormous respect for this man. He was an amazing guy, an amazing boss. I was a terrible assistant, and he liked me. He liked me, and I wrote his letters and I did things like that, and we had a good rapport. And he liked me too much to fire me, even though I was not particularly good at my job. And I also saw that I wasn't good at this. I had to do something else. And it was at that point when I thought, because writing had always been in the back of my mind, and I thought, right now, I'm not married, I don't have a family, I have responsibilities essentially to nobody but myself. So if I'm going to take a risk career-wise, now is the time to do it. There's as little tying me down as possible. So I thought I'll sublet my apartment in LA. I'll go live with a friend in New York and just write and see where that goes. If I fall on my face, it's not very far to fall, you know? And and in the middle of that, a friend of mine who I had written some stuff years before, I'm probably 26, 27 at this point, and had called me and said, let's do something together. And it felt like kismet, like we should just do this. And that was the first time I really started focusing on writing as something I was going to do.
So that
And,
was
and
That was Max.
that was Max. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was my partner, Max Muchnick.
So for students' benefit, that's the partner with whom David created
Yeah.
this incredible hit show.
And right. And Max Muchnick, he didn't change that's actually his real name. I know it sounds like a stage name. Um, but it's funny because I was kind of, as far as that went, I always thought I was sort of risk averse, but all the risks that I've taken have paid off in one way or another. Either I've learned something really valuable or it has been the catalyst to the next step. So and because my inclination is to take the safer course.
It's interesting. It's interesting when you describe that because, like, I very much in a completely different sphere. Like, I totally identify with it in the sense that, like, for the longest time, like, I grew up with no money and, like, I had, like, kind of like nothing to lose. And so, like, I just felt like that was such a it was such a huge advantage because, like, it's kind of like tails I win or heads I win, tails I lose, and I'm no worse off. So I'm just gonna
Right.
keep flipping the goddamn coin. Like, why not? Right? Like this, I'm just going to go all in, all in, all in, all in. And then like at some point, like things started going my way. And so like that kind of risk-seeking behavior, I think at a certain point in life, there's really no reason not to. Like,
Yes, but Tom, I always thought you were, but you weren't reckless. Well, actually, that's not entirely true. I was going to say Tom wasn't reckless, but occasionally he was. But for the most, but it was considered. Your risks were that it wasn't just sort of like random wanton behavior. It was there was a plan. There was a course of action. It wasn't just I'm going to do this for the sake of doing it. And you know, and you were also a guy who was always all in. As a crewbie, you were all in. I mean, the when it was, if it was a 5 miles run, you would do 10. If people had to wake up at
no, but
six,
it's like you may have it may have looked that way from the outside, but that actually is not true. And these guys are going to hear later on, like my biggest win ever in investment was like I got divorced. I was like hanging out, like I really like had nothing better to do. I ran into these guys, and like their company had been picked over by every venture capitalist, in the country, left for dead. Like they literally were the founder was getting his car repossessed. They like had not been paying payroll taxes, so they were going to get thrown in jail for illegal behavior. And I'm like, why not? Why
this
not?
is where I see
Right,
it's perfect
right.
for me.
And like, I'm like, it's like around the corner from my house. Like, why not? And like, we all made 500 times our money. But it was because like I just felt like I had nothing at that point in my life, and I was 32. Like I just had nothing to lose. Like so much
But
had
why
gone
them?
against
I
me.
mean, but why them?
I did have a like a intuition, like a gut feeling. I'm like, I see something here that everyone else. It's kind of like a timing thing. Like they had nothing. And then once they had something, it was too late because everyone else had looked at it and saw that they had nothing before. And so they couldn't see like with fresh eyes, like what the fuck was going on. And I
Hmm.
walked in like after like they had like this amazing product and amazing customers. And I'm like, wait a second, like, these guys are actually on to something. Like what are all these people missing? And like at a certain level, I'm
What were
like,
they missing? Why did they miss it?
uh, they missed it because they just saw the mess and they couldn't
Oh.
see underneath all the mess that like the CEO was kind of full of shit, but like there
Mm.
actually was truth finally to what he was saying. It was kind of like, it was kind of like what do you call it? Yelling, calling wolf over and over and over
Hmm.
again. And then like the last time there actually was a fucking wolf. And I was like,
Uh-huh.
guys, like, I don't know, like let's do this. And we also got incredibly lucky because it was internet commerce platform that, on the cusp of the internet boom, and you know, there was a lot of luck involved in like the
Yeah,
world moving in your direction. But
right.
so when you created Will and Grace, did the idea of having a gay character, was that part of it, or was it just kind of like part of the storytelling that created that?
It all goes back. I mean, again, going back to Sidney Pollack, who he was a director who made love stories. And I remember I always listened to him, and he said one of the things he said was, I've always made these love stories, and the thing that you realize is that a love story is only as good as the obstacle that comes between the two people, and um, because once they get together, the story's over, right? It's basically like then they live happily ever after. So what are the obstacles to them getting together? And, there are certain things that fell away, like class, for example. Well, people that, or even Romeo and Juliet, you have families who hate each other, whatever it is. Race, had been done in the 60s, with Guess Who's Coming to Dinner and that kind of thing. So we were tasked with coming up with a romantic comedy because there was a show, what was the Paul Reiser, Helen Hunt?
Oh, I know.
I'm
I
blanking
know
on.
that. I
This
know
is what
exactly. I
happens,
know the
kids.
show. Yeah,
This is
yeah,
what
yeah.
happens. You begin to forget titles and names.
I know you.
Um,
Mad about you. Mad about you.
well done. They wanted to replace Mad About You on NBC, and they were looking for a romantic comedy. And I remembered Sydney saying, you know, a romantic comedy is only as good as the obstacles that come between the two lovers. And I look over and I'm sitting across from my friend Max, who is gay, who was once very, very much involved with a very dear friend of mine named Janet Eisenberg. Knowing the whole, just he, I mean, back then, like the idea of coming out was terrifying. So he was great friends with this woman, Janet, and and they and she thought they were going to end up getting married, and he didn't give her any reason not to believe that. And I thought this is a love story with an insurmountable obstacle. You know, it's sort of right there. It's a romantic comedy, and they're never going to get together. So you could keep going. You could just, there's no way where they get together and live happily ever after. It's, you know, and that seemed like the idea that could sustain. So yes, in answer to your question, it was always a gay character. It had nothing to do with like, we want gay representation out there. If you start with an ideological premise, forget it. It's never going to work. You need to start with characters. You need to start with actual people and, you know, who you care about and are interesting. You get an audience to care, and then you're in. And then from that point on, it was just convincing a network and a studio that this was viable, that people would be interested in this, that there are universal themes here, and that it is not niche, and it's you know it's not a rarefied thing. The themes are universal.
So you guys, you may or may not even understand what we're talking about because so Will and Grace was an incredibly successful multi-season Emmy-winning show. It also was the first show to have a leading gay character, like which sounds like totally fucking insane at this point, but like it was a big deal at the time.
The
Um,
and in the context, so Ellen DeGeneres, do you guys know who that is? Who Ellen? Everyone knows her, right? Right. Um,
yes.
uh, and I'll assume they know nothing. We live in the United States of America. You know that's a country, right? Um, uh, so Ellen had just made a show called These Friends of Mine, it was called initially, but then it just became The Ellen Show. And she was sort of like looking for love with a man. That was a big part of it. And I remember we went in to interview with with the people who did the hiring and did the writing and were the creators of that show with Ellen. And they said, "What are some ideas you have?" And we kept talking about these romantic ideas, these possibilities of like guys she could, you know. And they're like, "Well, we want to stay away from that area." And we said, "Well, we're like, why?" And they said, "Well, we don't want her to be defined by her relationship with a man." I'm like, "Well, no one's saying anything about defining anything. It's just like, you know, a human being wants to get together with another human being. What's the problem?" They were dancing around the issue. And then finally, late in the at the end of the season, Ellen comes out as being gay, and it's a huge moment in television. This is 97. Okay. Um and all of this, it's like, wow, what a you know, broke the doors down. And the next season, the show fails miserably. Ellen is off the air within a season, and there was this sense that it had been rejected because of this gay content. And I knew that wasn't true. I knew it wasn't true because I knew that the reason it was rejected is because this character is going along as one thing and you're invested in it because of who Ellen is and because of what her life is. And all of a sudden, you're changing the premise entirely, and the entire meaning of the show shifts. And I thought to myself, would it have been any different if Ellen had decided to become a nun instead of, and it's like, no, it probably would have had the same effect. I love those pants, Tom. That's a good, that's what a professor wears. Good job. Um, So it occurred to me that that was not the issue. That it's not that people were rejecting Ellen's gayness, they were rejecting the fact that the show was one thing and overnight became something entirely different, and it felt like having the rug pulled out from underneath you.
So Will was gay from day one, and that created
They were
a
out and
consistent character.
unapologetic, and they were who they were, and it had everything to do with the fact that, like, I knew these people, I knew all those people. It wasn't. This was not something that was made up out of whole cloth or anything like that. These were relationships that I knew, that I always thought were funny, and I thought, if I think they're funny, why wouldn't other people think they're funny?
So I
That
want
was
to go. I want to like jump forward and then like go full circle on you because like I have this like great idea for show for you. So like I don't know if you're aware.
This is a really good way to start a court case. Also, like, I had an entire class here that this was my idea. But go
So
ahead.
like I don't know if you've ever heard of this like it's the number one business podcast called The Pivot, and it's this guy Scott Galloway who's like this marketing genius from
I love Scott
NYU.
Galloway.
Right. And so like and Kara Swisher. And so like Scott Galloway always was like just a little too arrogant. Like just a little he likes to brag about his big deals and his big balls and like all this shit, right? And so like and then he teamed up with Kara Swisher, who's like the most famous tech reporter ever. Like she's written all these books. She wrote for the Wall Street Journal. She wrote for the Washington Post. She's fucking brilliant, and she also takes no bullshit. And she knows all like the big tech guys. And so like
Mhm.
they get together, and so then all of a sudden like Scott can like tell his fucking dick jokes and like be like a straight guy in 2025, and she kind of like, she laughs at his stupid jokes, which gives us all permission to laugh at his stupid jokes. And she's a lesbian. And because, if it was a straight woman, it wouldn't work. And she's like that 10% smarter than he is. So she just kind of like slaps him around.
It's great.
And all of a sudden, like he like softened, his edges are softened. And it's just like, it's like magic. It's like the Daily Show plus like the greatest marriage ever, like all rolled into one.
Yeah.
And so like if you need like to like somehow decompress your mind as to like what the fuck is going on in the world, you just
Mhm.
listen to these guys and like they're
Yes.
so smart, they explain everything. And the gender dynamic is like so perfect for like 2025, and it
Mhm.
requires like this brilliant, like kind of a little too macho guy getting like hammered by like this slightly smarter lesbian that just makes it like sing. It's just like I love it.
Yeah. The dynamic is amazing. It really is. I know the show, and I actually know him. I've met him a couple of times. And he always has good advice for for people get. By the way, is that your idea? Because I'm gonna have to pay.
Yeah, yeah, that's the idea.
Because it's
Well,
not
he's
just you.
also he's very much on the whole like young men are the biggest problem we have, and whether you want to believe that or not, they will take us all down if we don't do something about it. Which
Completely.
he can kid around until he gets to that topic, and then he's like deeply, deeply serious because
Yes.
he's got two teenage boys and he grew
And
up without a
yes,
dad.
he's empathetic. He really is.
Yeah, yeah,
And he talks, and he's very um I actually, when a friend of mine was interviewing him as a podcast with an audience, so I went in and I saw it, and Scott Galloway, he was very, I mean, it's that whole, he comes off as someone who's really heady, who's not particularly just sort of emotional. It's like, here's the facts, here's the way the world is, deal with it. And he got talking about his kids and talking about his own sort of wounds. He got so vulnerable and started crying. Like,
yeah.
during the thing, and it was really moving. Like, it was kind of shocking. It was disarming,
That's only because of
how
his lesbian friend, though. He didn't know how to do that before.
maybe, yeah, lesbian friend and maybe a little ketamine therapy, but from what I've heard. But he's so impressive. Just talking about follow your passion is the advice given by people who have already succeeded. Do what you're good at is the adage that
Yeah.
he always returns to. That's one of his commandments.
Let me just tick off a few more questions, and then we have a few guys here on the call that can ask some questions too. But so what's the key to writing humor? Like, how do you do it?
Um, it's, people do it really differently. But for me, it is. It really is using yourself and your friends as the barometer of what's funny, right? I mean, and don't think to yourself, oh, an audience will like this. Think what would be funny for me and my friends. Honestly, that's a starting point. Um, and so you're writing from within and not from without. You know what I mean? And uh, it's it really comes down to what do I think is funny and why do I think it's funny? And you know, how can I take the things that I have seen in life that have made me laugh or that I have found amusing and put it into a form so that it translates. A lot of people are really funny. I know a lot of really funny people who can't write funny scenes, or can't, I mean, for something gets lost in the translation between what's in their mind and what's actually put on paper.
When
It's a
you were doing
curious thing.
I was reading about the creation of or some of us on set at Veep, I guess it was, but like, and I'm just curious to your process. Do you do multiple takes and have the actors do it slightly differently in order to pick the right one, or do you like already know how you want them to do it and you're just trying to get
And
them to like do it the way
we've
you want them
had
to?
we've had a week of rehearsal when we actually shoot it. And so Veep is a single camera show. It's shot more like a movie, right? Multi-camera shows are a little bit more like plays. So it's almost, there are four cameras. It's almost shot like on a flatter set where you're not going in for close-ups. The camera isn't moving the way it would in a movie. It's a little more like a filmed play than it is a movie.
Okay.
And so the emphasis is a little bit more on the words. So what we would do is we do no more than two takes of a scene and we run the whole scene and there's an audience there that's telling you what works and what doesn't.
Right.
And so um, what will change are the words. We'll change the jokes between takes. So they've been working on a scene the entire time. We know what you want. They've rehearsed it. They know what the blocking is. They know what the thing is. And if there are jokes or lines or things that die or that don't quite get the reaction that you want, or you think you can better, then we'll do it. We'll change the words in the next take.
Okay.
Every now and then there are physical moves that we'll want differently, but really that's the way it is. And once you've rehearsed, because you're in a process of rewriting every day,
Right.
you go down to the set, you see a rehearsal, and you see what works and what doesn't. You go back to the writer's room and you make rewrites based on what you've just seen. Then you see it again the next day. And you look at it and you see it and you see what's worked and what hasn't based on what you've rewritten. And then you go back and rewrite that. And it's a process of refining until you get to the shoot night, which is like it's like putting on a play every week, where you have the audience come in. There's most importantly, there's like better craft service. The food is better. And you spend the night shooting this thing that you've been working on all week.
So it reminds me very much. So we've been talking recently about stick with me on this, but it reminds me very much of like the idea in athletics and also in the professional world a lot in different realms. It's called the growth mindset, meaning that like you're always trying to like get to your potential, and like that's a constant improvement process. It's not measured versus anyone else. It's not measured, whether you break a world record or any of that. It's really a measured trying to get to the maximum of your potential. And so the
Hmm.
creative process seems to me like what you're talking about is that, which is like you're kind of constantly improving until you get to that shoot night. And then even there, you may try a couple tweaks, but you have a live audience, so you're kind of like set, what you're doing. But it kind of, the question really there is like, how can these guys are all, so they're soccer players, basketball players, and rowers. They're freshmen and sophomores. They're interested in business. I don't know that any of them are going to go to Hollywood, although maybe you've convinced them. But how can they bring creativity uh, into their professional endeavors, wherever they are? Like, how would you advise them to think about that?
I mean, creativity, but also and liberal arts. I mean, it's the idea. Like, I'm a huge advocate of liberal arts. I am a 100% believer that if you are an interested person and you have a broad scope of things that interest you, you will be better at whatever it is that you do. You will bring a greater depth and a greater breadth of knowledge to whatever you do. You will be able to think uh, outside the conventions of what you're doing because you have other things to draw from, other sources to draw from. I really feel like a genuine curiosity about and I feel like that's at the heart of creativity also is just this sense of like I'm interested, I'm curious, what if this, you know? And uh and I think in any field that helps you to be able to think and problem solve creatively, like to think, well, if that doesn't work, what about this? And to have more sources to draw from, literature, history, art, whatever it is, it all matters. It all factors in to your process, to your decision-making process. I've drawn when I'm writing, I draw from every part of my life, from from math. Like it's all interconnected. I have it's a family friend. His kid is out in at USC and he's studying business. I'm like, what are you taking? And everything is geared toward business. I'm like, you've got to take other classes. You shouldn't be spending your semester figuring out whether an $18 entree is going to be more efficient over time than a $17.50 entree for, I mean, whatever it is that he's studying, it is only that. It's that qua that, and I'm thinking to myself, if you had other interests and other things coming into your brain, you would be thinking outside of this box. And I want to, and it also helps with your life. Like I want to say, once you achieve, let's say you achieve your success, sort of, then what? Then what? What turns you on? What's interesting to you? What do you want to say? What do you want to say? And if you can answer those questions, it will help everything you do, any endeavor you do. I don't care if you're a banker or a barista or a television writer. It's like the more expansive and the more stuff that you have going into your well, the better you're going to be at the thing you are. I believe that
No,
wholeheartedly.
and so like when I hear you talk about like going all in on writing and then ultimately, creating Will and Grace, like, to me, it's absolutely no different than, my experience, starting a company and then like starting a venture capital firm. It's like what you did was a lot sexier than what I did, but the core of it is the same, which is the creativity part, you
And
know?
even the process is similar because
Yeah,
again, it's the
100%.
process of
100%.
refinement. It's
100%.
it's doing something. It's ironing a shirt, right? You put it on there and then you have to go back and iron the part and you think you got it. You do a rough one, then you go back and it's like you boys have never ironed a shirt in your lives. What am I talking about?
Well, it's even when we've been doing these informational interviews with a bunch of different business people, and I keep saying like, look, you got to actually listen. You got to listen to what they're saying because like if you listen and you're curious, then you can ask the next question. You don't need to go down to like whatever you have written on the page because the next question is actually gonna be way better than whatever it is you planned because it's spontaneous, right?
That's right.
Um, but if you're not listening, then all bets are off. So what
I'm sorry, what did you say, Tom?
all bets are off.
Oh, wasn't listening. Um,
So let's
but,
let's let's get big picture. So
hmm.
one question I like to ask people. So what if you looked at your entire career, you can actually even broaden it out to your life. What are you most proud of?
um, uh, am I not proud of things? I guess my reflexive response would be my kids, but whatever. It's um, uh, I'm proud of the fact that I I'm just going to say accomplishment for accomplishment's sake, whether that's and that takes on any form. I knew I wanted to be a parent, say, for example. I wanted to be a parent, but when you're conceiving of it, it seems like some abstraction. To actually have done it and to actually, I'm proud of that. The fact that I said I wanted to be a television writer and I set out and I actually did it. This is a cop out answer, isn't it?
That's fine. That's all good.
I mean, honestly, when you start something, when you say, here's a goal of mine, and you actually set out to take the steps to do it, it is it's it's a great source of pride. I am I am I'll tell you what I'm not proud of is my Clippers. Wait, just a quick digression here. My
Well,
case.
one of my question is why do the Clippers suck every fucking year?
Because they're the answer is because they're the Clippers. I mean,
All
the
right.
the answer is contained right in the sentence. Like we're curt. It Here's the thing, and you guys can agree or disagree, but it is my contention when we saw Luka get traded for Anthony Davis this year. I lived through Kareem Abdul-Jabbar being traded for Brian Winters, Dave Myers, and three draft picks. Okay, the worst trade in NBA history was Paul George for Shea and five draft picks because the Oklahoma City Thunder went from the worst team in the NBA to the best team in the NBA, and the Clippers have stayed the same. It is the
I'm just
worst. What?
I'm just gonna let the record show that when you ask like one of the most famous writers in Hollywood what he's the most proud of, he ultimately starts talking about how he's not proud of the fact that he's a Clippers fan. Like,
It's so upsetting. Well, I'm proud that I've endured. I'm proud
okay.
that I'm
All
proud that
right.
I
All right.
remain
Let
a
me ask
Clippers
one more.
fan.
Let me ask one more, and then I'll let do. We only have a few guys here today because everyone's doing other stuff. But let me, and I want
I
them to
wasn't a big
finish
enough
this.
draw. You need to get a bigger name next time.
It's all right. So
Hmm.
another related question is, what's one thing that you regret that was a mistake that you wish you could take back?
See, I would say my first marriage, but even that produced something that I'm enormously proud of, which is my daughter. But I will say this. I will say this for gentlemen, the guys out there, there's something about guys seem to get married to the person they're with when they're ready to get married. And and that was my experience. That was my experience. And you need to be so aware of the person you're marrying. And I mean, and who's a good person? She was good, just totally incompatible. And it was obvious if I gave it any thought. But I was dating her and I was ready to get married, so I did it. Be a little more circumspect about that. Really, really consider it. And also the people that love you, like if they're skeptical, even if they don't say it, uh, ask yourself why that is.
We get fatherly advice.
Mhm.
All right, let's just open it up a little bit, and I have actually two final questions at the end.
It informs honestly, it informs everything. So, for example, a um, I was an English major, and I even remember so there was a book that I had read. This is actually not a book that I read in class, but it was a book I read at that time. It was a Kurt Vonnegut book called Mother Night. And the opening sentence of it is, "This is the only story I've ever written whose moral I know for sure. Not that it's a great moral, but I happen to know what it is." And the moral of the story is, we are who we pretend to be, so be careful what you pretend to be. All right? So that was the idea. It was about a guy, it was about a spy, basically a double agent during World War II is what the story was. But we are who we pretend to be, so be careful what you pretend to be. Now is that's not that's an episode. That's a relationship. You hear a phrase like that, and suddenly it's like, oh my God, I think that's true. I think that's a universal truth. Like, we are who we pretend to be, so be careful what you pretend to be. And we use that this episode. There was this dandy, on a show. This show that I'm doing right now is called Mid-Century Modern. It's on Hulu. Tune in. We're hanging very much on the balance for a second season. And the character of this guy is trapped by this persona he has created years ago. Okay. And he put forth this one notion of who he was, this haughty, kind of holier than thou with exquisite taste and everything like that. And now he can't escape it. He can't, and he is giving this advice, that exact, we stole that line directly, to somebody who seems to be following in his footsteps. You are who you pretend to be, so be careful what you pretend to be. Now, that's just an example of something that you picked up. It's a lot, but I find myself doing this all thinking about the dynamics in terms of a philosophy class that I saw, that I sat in, or an historical situation that informs what you're doing right now. I mean, it is you think about the dynamics in a particular, you know, historical moment. And then you think, well, here's what was really going on, you know, in the Hitler-Stalin pact, and who's deceiving whom or whatever it was. And it's like, that's usable. Like that is all usable in terms of human dynamics and human interactions, which is really all sitcom writing is.
Well, and I would say again, like generalize it to like that's actually usable in business context too, because you're trying to understand human beings. Like, right. So
Hmm.
like it's all you're always trying to figure out what people's motivations are and like and try and figure out, how to motivate, how to inspire them, how to compete with them, all that. It's a good place to stop. So we asked two questions of everybody. Uh, one of them's not really fair, but I will anyways. What's your favorite movie?
I'm gonna say my favorite movie, and I'll choose this only because it made such a huge impact, and I saw it when I was at Wesleyan. And it was Once Upon a Time in the West, in 1969, Sergio Leone spaghetti Western. And I had seen a bunch of Westerns, before, like, and when I saw this movie, it absolutely blew my mind at how big it blew up the myth of the West. And I just remember sitting there stunned. The endings, Henry Fonda. See, I don't. Are you guys film guys at all? Any of you? Like, if I say Henry Fonda, you know who Henry Fonda was? Okay, Henry Fonda was a
Blank,
guy.
blank,
He
blank
was,
stares.
yeah. Henry Fonda was like and the American everyman, the you loved him. He was solid in his values and his morals, and no matter what happened around him, like he was true to his values. He is playing a sociopathic killer in this thing, and he's brilliant, icy cold. Charles Bronson, one of his first roles, Jason Robards, and it had everything. It had a critique of capitalism in it. It had um Like the big capitalist is trying to make his way across the country on a train and slowly his bones are rotting from polio. And it's a love story and it's a big Western and it's a big myth and it's an opera. I loved it. It had everything to me. And I saw it at exactly the right time when I was so receptive to this, when my brain was open.
So if you have one word to leave these guys with and the students who will watch this back, what would the word, as they think about their future, what would the word be?
Um, does it have to be a single word?
No, whatever you want.
I would say be inspired by the mediocrity of others. Here's what I mean by that. Here's what I mean by that. Um, Whatever it is you want to do, there is somebody who is doing it who's not that good. Okay. And when I was full of self-doubt, and thought I have no business doing what I want to be doing. I I got involved. I got on a show, still being sort of cowed by the whole situation, thinking, oh, it's only a matter of time before they find out that I'm not supposed to be here, that I have no business being here. And then I went to work for someone who I knew I was better than. I knew I could do, and I thought to myself, well, he's doing what I want to be doing. So what's stopping me? And the answer was nothing. That was that was the thing that gave me the kick that I needed. And it was somebody who was doing what I wanted to do, who I knew that I could be at least as competent as. And those people are everywhere. Like whatever it is you want to do, somebody is doing it who is not as good as you. Rest assured of that.
We're gonna leave it there. Uh, I'll give you one more extra bonus question. What do you think of straight 60-year-old men who ride pink bicycles?
They're brave. They are they're so secure in their own masculinity, or they're hiding something. One of the two.
All right. Well, we'll really leave it there because it is an hour now. So thank you so much for your time today, man. That was awesome. And
Great
I
being
will
here.
take you out to dinner at either in LA or in Boston, your choice.
Wow.
That would
You see what
yeah,
happened there? He
yeah,
won the bet and he's acting like he lost the bet.
yeah.
That,
It's all
I
good.
want to say I manipulated that, but really he kind
It's
of
all
did
good.
that
It's
himself.
all good.
Good
All
luck
right,
to
big love,
everybody
brother.
who's listening.
All right. Talk to you later, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye, bye, bye.